We are live here.
All right. Welcome to our YouTube channel. This is the Maneuver YouTube channel. My name is Dean. This is my buddy Tony. We're going to be doing a series of debates on just whatever topic we feel like talking about. Today's question we're going to be debating is going to be: Is marriage good for men in today's society? Is it worth it for men to get married? Um, With that being said, we're just going to jump right in. So, my position on this, I'm going to be defending the traditional conservative viewpoints. I do believe it's good for men to become married men in today's society. I think it's better for men as individuals, although it is more challenging than it used to be, and there are certain disadvantages that need to be overcome. I still think it's better overall. I also happen to believe it's better for society in general. If men are getting married, accepting that level of responsibility, raising their children in a home with two parents that are lifelong partners, um, it's better for our spiritual health. It's what God wants us to do. Um, and that's the position I'm going to be taking. It's, you could call that the white pill opinion, um, but that's my position.
All right. I'm Tony over here. I'm going to be doing the other side of it and some disagreements with his white pill position. And I'm basically going to be arguing that men do not benefit from marriage today as they did in the traditional sense. And they need to be withdrawing consent from the government in order to force change. Um, Under the current system, there's no path to victory for the average man. Ever since 1979, beginning with the implementation of no fault divorce in California, arguably earlier, but we'll start there. The fertility rate has been dropping, and this is correlated with the marriage rate because the divorce rate has become rampant. So marriage is actually the marriage rate itself has gone way down since 1979. So if you're asking a man to participate in a game that was heavily stacked against them, in any other case except marriage, if they're acting rational, they will say no. They will draw consent or they'll abstain from participating. Marriage is just this one thing where men, for some reason, just don't think logically and rationally when they plan to sign this contract. So we'll get into the ins and outs of why I think that, but I think in general, today's society, I disagree with Dean here. I think that marriage for men today is not as beneficial as it was years and years ago, and I think we can find some middle ground here. But in general, I'm opposing it. I'm opposing that. So yeah, we can jump right into it.
All right. Well, that's a good intro to the first question then, which I had, which was, what are the reasons for the decline in the rate in Western society? So, my response to that is basically, long and the short of it, is feminism, right? I think we live in a society where women are encouraged to seek independence from men. They're taught from a young age to not need a man, whatever that means, right? And when you tell young girls they don't need men in their lives, they shouldn't seek men, they shouldn't care about men's validation or attention, they're immediately going to be pushed into the masculine role that men are meant to assume in society. Um, and it leads to problems not just interpersonally in our marriage, but in society in general, right? Because I mean, we could just talk about the economic problems that it causes, where you have men who are going out trying to build a stable life for themselves, trying to build themselves up into a position where they're capable of supporting a family, raising kids, and doing everything they want to do. But now they're competing against an additional 50% of the population for jobs that they normally would have, been able to get. So it's a problem for that reason. We also have issues related when you go to education, which is the pathway towards that level of freedom. The university system is completely dominated by the feminist ideology, by the progressive ideology, and I think as a result, you've seen the universities decline in quality. There's really no reason for men to even go to university these days. I mean, there is because you still get the credential, which is important. It gets your foot in the door, and that's how you kind of get the jobs and you start working. But realistically, I don't believe in today's society. I really believe this. I don't think there's anything that you need to go to university to learn how to do. Like if you're absolutely interested in becoming a programmer and becoming whatever high skill thing you want to do, there's plenty of resources to get started on that on your own. And if you can build the skills up on your own and develop that, you can go into the world on your own and not really need that university education. But
Let me ask you something, and I don't mean to interrupt you here, but
yeah,
you're describing kind of descriptors that I agree with formally. Most of them are so far that you said. I kind of agree with that. But if we talk about just what you just said about credentials and about institutions, and you think university itself, and this could be another conversation later, but well, just let me ask you for clarification. Do you think going to university is not needed for most or for all in today's society not needed?
I think it's not necessary for anybody. Yeah, I
And
think it's. I think
but are you saying that the credentials are the only thing that's benefit? Like if you let's say you want to become a lawyer, you have to go to university to get the credentials to be a lawyer, right? So do you think that that's the only you can learn everything about the law outside of university in a better way, and then if there was no credential program for that, you could just defend people in law?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I believe you can train yourself on anything. The information is just so abundant. I mean, there's just so much information available. And even we even get to the point now where you have like entire free university courses online on
Right.
basically any subject you want to learn about. So here's the thing. Ideally, this is not true in the ideal world. Like I think that there should be a place for a university, and ideally that would be the place you would go to learn from experts and people with experience and get that under your belt, and that would be the best way to do it. I just think that okay, and the second point I was going to make on that is related to this. Basically, the way the universities function these days, because of the feminist ideology, is no longer attractive to men. Right? It's no longer the way men are programmed. Essentially, men are competitive. Is my point. Men are competitive. They want to go to a competitive environment. They want to be pushed to their limits. They want to stretch themselves thin, and they want to find out how far they can go, right? And the only way you can have that is if there's an opportunity to fail. And if you have an opportunity to fail, you're immediately excluding, I'll be honest with you, you're excluding most women from that, right? Because women are going to this university because they're expecting to get on a set of rails
Right.
that pushes them towards a guaranteed outcome, right? If you're a man, if you have this masculine point of view on anything in the world, you're you're willing to go into an unknown situation with an unclear result and just forge a path forward anyway. But
Again, let me
women
ask you
aren't
another
really
aside here,
programmed for that.
just to kind of harp on what you're saying, because we're talking about universities here, and again, we'll get to the substance of the main debate, which was marriage, but it is downstream from this. So let's actually just handle this early. So you're saying that women, when they go to okay, so not just women, but men used to benefit a lot more from going to university, but nowadays we're almost, would you say we're almost in a post university society, or even I guess we're approaching a post university society?
Think we're getting there, and I think I honestly think that would be a negative for society. I don't think it's a good thing
Okay.
necessarily that like you don't need a university education to do this and that, right? I think that that speaks to number one the quality of the universities, but
Right.
also the quality of the people that are doing jobs these days. I think you see that in the decline of basically every field that we see. There's progress is stagnating, products are getting worse. That's the main reason for the malaise in
Sure.
everybody's point of view. But
Well,
yes,
because
I think
we're double clicking on universities, and I like this because it is important. But I do want to ask you, because this is kind of perfectly analogous to kind of what my viewpoint on the marriage situation is. You're saying that it's not a good thing that we're almost approaching a post university era where it's a true thing. It's not good but true. I have the same position about marriage. I think it's not good, the current state of it, but I do believe we're in a post marriage. I guess we're in a post marriage society. And the reason I think that, well, before I even get into that, I might ask you a question here. Kick it over to you. You mentioned in your kind of intro, you said it's better for men as individuals to be married. Can you explain what the justification for that is?
yeah. So I see marriage as something. Well, let's put it this way. I see partnerships with women, relationships with women, as something that transcends human institutions and laws and rules. This is something. It's a divine mandate by God to for men to lead women. Right. I believe in the biblical account of Genesis, where Adam was created first. God saw that he was lonely and gave him a helpmate, which is the translation. Woman as a helpmate, which was created from Adam's rib to keep him company and also support him. And it's for any women listening, I know this is like a touchy subject because, and even in the Christian world, this is a touchy subject because a lot of women hear that account and they think that I'm saying that women are basically slaves of men, or they're supposed to serve men only. There's nothing to do with what I'm saying. I'm saying that men are the leaders, women are in a supporting role, and that's a very important role in its own right, right? But if women are pushed away from that, if they're discouraged from adopting that role, and they're given this pathway in the university towards a level of independence that is really an illusion, right? Which is my main point with the university is like I wouldn't make the point, and that's part of why I started with this. I would not make the point that men should go and try to fix the university system by going to university, right? I would not say that because that's not going to happen. That's actually
Sure.
impossible to do.
Sure.
The only way to fix that is going to be from the outside, and I don't think I don't. If a man wants to take that challenge on for himself, go ahead. But I'm not saying that I wouldn't recommend that. Now, marriage is different because when you enter into a partnership with a woman and you adopt your masculine role the way you're supposed to do according to God, that is going to trigger something in her that's basically going to change her. Men are leaders and they're capable of this type of um, change, I guess, in this particular instance because it's written into the laws of reality, I think, right? So, but the original question, of course, was why is marriage declining? And I think that this is the key reason why. Is because we've set up this fake system
Right.
really that gives women this pathway towards independence, and that's really what's causing that.
Well, to answer the question, I guess I didn't give an answer to the prompt. So to answer that question of why it's declining, I agree with you with a lot of what you said about universities and the systems that are being put in place to encourage or discourage, disincentivize marriage. But I also think that there's a lot of other things that go into why marriage is declining. Like what I mentioned in my opener, the no fault divorce implementation. It's now in every state. Now it's running rampant. I know people can say that this is just like a band. This is what was needed to fix the problem of divorce, but in my opinion, no. It's something that is actually causing more divorces. If you had a barrier of exit, I guess, or even a higher barrier of entry to marriage, there would be way less divorce. And this isn't something that I even think is up for dispute. But this is one thing that causes it. I'm sure you don't disagree with me on that, but maybe you do. But another thing I think is a big factor here that we need to look at is 80% of divorces are initiated by women. So I'm going to ask you, kick it over to you here. If you're hypothetically, if you are setting up a business deal with somebody and it's a contractor or what have you, and you were told by the contractor, hey, there's a 41% chance that this contract's not going to work out, and I'm 80% of the time going to be the one that's going to break the contract. Are you going to sign that contract?
Um, that's a great question, and definitely not. Yeah, I would not sign that contract. Yeah. Um, to My rebuttal to that, if I have one, would be mostly that uh, the marriage relationship, the relationship between men and women, does transcend those types of systems. So now, I'm not going to say every man who's gotten divorced by his wife deserved it, okay? Because that's too harsh, and I think that that's not nuanced enough. I think it's totally possible that as a man you could do everything right and still be divorced by your wife, right? I might not even go as far as to say that you just chose the wrong women, although in many cases I think that that is true. But let's say you did everything right, you did everything you could to vet the woman appropriately in your interview, and you married her, and she still betrayed you in the end. Yes, you've been done wrong, and I don't really have an answer to that. The only thing I would say is that these types of challenges, these types of hurdles are just basically part of life. Like it's just what I was saying at the beginning. As a
It
man,
wasn't part of life
I
in 1920.
believe
This wasn't a
what's
part of
that?
life. It wasn't a part of life like this
Right.
in 1920s. I don't think this is. And again, this might be something you agree with because we're talking about institutions and how they build up and break down. I'm not trying to be hostile here, but I'm going to ask you one more time. What does a man get from marriage today from the government?
Okay. Today, what from the government? I don't think a man really gets much from the government, honestly. The marriage contract as it is now, and maybe we could transition into no fault divorce. Although I don't think we're going to disagree on that because I actually think the idea of a no fault divorce is not biblical, and therefore against the laws of God, really.
Sure.
So as long as that is a problem that needs to be overcome on an institutional level. So that needs reform. That needs sort of a different approach. But to me, that's not a big enough reason to not get married.
Okay. But you mentioned better for society in general. This was your opener. You said it was better for men as individuals, and it's better for society in general for men to get married. I agree with you in general. If everybody stayed married one time, it would be better for society in general. But what you cited for that was you said raising children in a home with two parents. That was your first thing you said, and that's the number. In my opinion,
Yeah.
that's if you look at those numbers. I mean, if you look at the numbers, obviously it's a lot better. You have way more success chances as a child on almost every metric if you're with two parents. So yeah, of course. But the question I'll kick back to you again is if you get is there anything that the state can give you as a man to get when you get married today in today's society that you can't get from just being in a relationship with a woman without getting married and having a kid with her, having two kids with her, what have you? Or are you saying that marriage as a concept is better because it binds you together and it more pressures you into staying with a woman?
Yeah, that would be my argument is that essentially there's a difference between just cohabitating with a woman permanently and um, committing your life to her before God and before observers, before witnesses,
Like
right?
you're talking about covenant versus
So
contract, right? In some ways.
yes,
So
yes, I
if
would
you
say
had
so.
if you are pro marriage, and again I'm pro marriage in many respects, obviously, but if you're pro marriage and you're talking through the lens of I guess through the lens of religion, if you will, would you be in favor of this advice to a general man? Hey, don't get married through the government, get married through your church. Or is that something that you? Because I'm trying to wonder like what are the actual reasons to get married from the government's perspective? Like if you're talking to a guy who's let's say he's 19, 20 years old and he's or maybe this is 25 years old man and he's religious, he like goes to church and stuff or what have you, he finds a woman, he wants to get married to her. What's wrong with telling that guy, hey, just get married through your church, don't worry about getting the government involved, they can't help you or they're not going to do anything for you other than they're going to potentially hurt you 80% of the time, 41% of the time if it's your first marriage. But my point is they're going to likely hurt you, they're not going to do anything to help you. So just get married through the church, they're more likely to help you, in situations that you were talking about earlier, potential divorces. Churches don't divorce you unless there's a legitimate reason. So it's kind of I don't see the difference. That's what my whole argument is kind of hinging on, and that's kind of a spoiler alert to my argument. You see where I'm going with this? I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you're saying is that there's no reason to enter the legal government contract of marriage. And instead, you should probably just go and enter the covenant itself, which is more important in my view, anyway. Yes. Okay, so I still would push back, though. I would push back a little bit, and here's why. Um, Basically, there are legal, and maybe you did ask me this, and I should have brought this up, but I didn't really think about it. So there are certain legal reasons to get married, right? There are legal protections in terms of healthcare. There's the fact that you're going to be raising kids, ideally, and those kids are going to need they need you to be their father legally as well, right? You go to a school, you go to a hospital, you go to any of these institutions that exist in the same world, this secular world that we inhabit. You need those legal protections for those reasons. So I still think you kind of
Are you
you
saying
kind of
that
have to
children
do
you
it
can't
in
take
my
a
view.
child to a hospital unless you're married to his mother?
I think you could take the child to the hospital, but I think that you'd have a hard time getting information about the child, and you may not even be able to bring the child out of it, out of the you know
So we're
the
talking about a
hospital. You may not
custody
even be able to
situation
collect
where
them.
if you're not married, like you're gonna have a hard time getting access to information about your child, like through school and through these public institutions if you're not married.
Yes,
I,
yes,
I
yes,
don't believe
and
that's
that's so
true.
that's
I don't think that's the case. I think you can just, as far as like, well, as far as personal anecdote, my parents weren't married when I grew up, um, and there was no problem. Like my stepdad could go to my school, pick me up. No, all you have to do is register with the school who you are, and just say, oh, I'm the provider. I'm the domestic parent, what have you. They don't look at your marriage
okay.
license. They don't verify any of that stuff. I'm not trying to like say this to just prove a point. I'm asking you, is there anything that you have to use your marriage license from the government to prove, to verify, or anything that you can't, that, like for example, you mentioned healthcare. I guess that would be like the big thing. If you want your wife to have health insurance through your employer, you have to be married to qualify for an event, like a qualifying life event would be like getting married. Has that ever been checked? Or can you just say, hey, I'm married?
Theoretically, it could be checked. Yeah,
It
I
could be
mean that wouldn't
audited.
be that hard to request a marriage certificate. Actually, that may even be. I actually think you do have to submit a marriage certificate usually. Whether or not it's actually like reviewed and vetted is another
Right.
question. But you do theoretically have to do that. So yeah, okay, I'll remove the kids from it because you're probably right about that. It may not affect you legally. You can have rights over your child without being married. So
Well,
I'll
the thing
remove
about
that.
kids,
So
and this
it's
is kind
really
of where I'm, and again, I keep interrupting you, but the thing about kids here is that I think that the kids part of it, marriage or no marriage, you are pinned to whatever the law. Like you don't need to be married to pay child support. You never have had. There's no divorce needed or anything. If you have a kid, and they can take you to court and get you to pay child support, and that's fine. That I think that actually is fine. I don't actually mind that at all because that's not anything to do with marriage. That's just kids. So kids, if you have a kid, you should pay for the kid, right? I mean, you should support the kid. But marriage, I don't think there's anything you benefit from the government. I agree with you on all the like spirituality of it, and like you get closer to your partner as a covenant. It's like a sign and everything. It actually takes the relationship to the next step. It shows your wife you're serious. It shows other men in your life you're serious about it. I get that, but there's no benefit in my mind from going to the government other than maybe the health insurance thing. But even the health insurance thing, in my mind, you can just say you're married and then just claim that she's a spouse. If that gets you in trouble, I guess I'm not going to advocate for illegal activity if that's illegal. But if that gets you in trouble with the law, I mean, we got to change the law on that. I think that's kind of absurd to, you know,
well that's like the crux of the problem, right? If you just take the health stay on the healthcare example, if you're saying like, I want to add my wife to my healthcare, and you have to submit a document proving that you're married, that's that's the crux of the issue. Like you may say that we have to change the law. Well, that's kind of that would be my point too. We do have to change the law when it as it pertains to marriage because the law as it pertains to marriage is incorrect.
right.
So I would just agree with that. Like it has to be changed.
Well,
But then, there's also like just off the top of my head. I mean, you also have like tax incentives to get
sure,
married. I
sure.
mean, if you're filing as a head of household
I
with
mean,
a
you could
married
claim you
spouse
can
instead
claim
of
you can claim your girlfriend as a dependent.
well, it's is your I don't is your wife a dependent when you file? I think you're filing like, and especially today if your wife is working, which she probably is,
And she shouldn't
then
be. That's my point. If we go back to a system like you're talking about, your wife shouldn't have to work. If she works, that's okay. She can work as a nurse, etc., teacher, etc. But none of this stuff should be any. The government shouldn't is not going to help you in my mind. I know there's some small cases that you're talking about, taxes, etc., healthcare. This stuff is not be only to marry. I mean, there's a second option you can go through, the domestic partnership, what have you. You can talk about that. You can talk about all that stuff. It doesn't need to be marriage. Or I mean, obviously, okay. Here's another thing. Is this the defeater to my argument would be a prenuptial agreement? I mean, if you sign a prenuptial agreement, I have no problem. You marry 10 people, marry whoever you want. But if you don't
yeah.
have that prenuptial agreement, you're likely to lose. It's a losing game. It's a losing game here. And if you get married with no prenuptial agreement, you're gonna get divorced 41 out of 100 times, and 80 out of those divorce 80 out of those divorces are gonna be initiated by the woman. So it just doesn't make any sense to me to tell a young man, hey, um, you got to get your job, you got to get your career, get in shape, do all this stuff, and then also, hey, by the way, go to the government and tell them, hey, I want to sign up voluntarily for to kind of get potentially lose half or more than half of my net worth or of my livelihood to a woman who cheats on me, etc., whatever. Why would I tell them that when I could just, hey, go to church, meet somebody there, get married to the church, etc., and then have a family and just keep the government out of it?
Okay, so I would say this: if the 4 out of 10 statistic, we have to be honest, is it's a little unreliable, right? Because you're dealing with people. Number one, a lot of people get married more than once.
This
You
is
get married
only
more than once, you're
a
almost
this
guaranteed to get divorced, right?
Forty-one
There's
percent
also
chance for the
many.
first marriage. This is the first marriage only. I took the rest of it out of it. It's 56 to
Okay,
overall. I
okay,
averaged it, but I knew you'd bring that up, so brought only the first marriage. 41% chance first marriage.
okay. Well, that's a good point then. Well, the second point I was going to make is that you're also dealing with. I would say probably the vast majority of marriages are secular in nature, right? The vast majority of those people are not getting married with the I mean, okay, everybody gets married with the intent of staying with the person forever, right? But they're not making a commitment to God,
A
the
covenant.
covenantal commitment. Yes, they're not entering into that with the express intent of never ever getting married. So I don't know the statistics of like religious people stay married longer, but I bet you they do.
They do.
Just that's
They
just
do.
my intuition on that. Okay,
Much
so
longer.
do you know the number of like the divorces?
Hinduism is the highest, but that's because of arranged marriages, etc. I believe Protestant Christians, I believe, are it's in the 70s. I think. Could look into it later, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a lot higher.
So the so as you come closer and closer to the way that marriage is supposed to be, obviously the marriage is more stable, right? So I'm not, I'm not right now. I'm not making a point. I don't have a point for the secularists of the world. Like if you don't believe in God and you don't, then don't get married. As simple as that. You're right. Like if you don't believe in that and you're entering into a marriage with the possibility of thinking, hey, if things go south, I'm just going to get divorced, then you're right. There's really no reason to get married, and I can't defend that. So I suppose when it comes to the legal argument, I would be comfortable just saying, just maybe even conceding it in some respect, and just saying, I think that there are benefits to getting married, but they may not outweigh the risks, and you should still enter the covenant. And here's the thing: if you're gonna take that step, obviously that's a permanent, lifelong step. So if you're doing that and you trust the woman you're with, then entering into the legal contract becomes less risky,
Mm.
like significantly less risky. So you do have to take that into account, and that may not be such a big deal anymore. But still, it may be worth avoiding if you're just very risk averse in that sense, And I
But
wouldn't
the
necessarily
average man,
disagree with it.
if you're trying to give a 25-year-old advice here, and I'm with you on religious, if they're religious, are less likely to get divorced because they're taking this kind of seriously. But you look at a 25-year-old man and look at him, and he looks around and he sees people getting married that shouldn't be getting married, but they're getting married, right? And these folks are kind of in a way ridiculing the idea of marriage. And let me, where I'm going with this is, if you have people that are marrying people that they shouldn't be marrying, it looks like the marriage itself is almost not what you're talking about. It's like a secular marriage. It's like it's like if people are roommates, but the government signs
Yeah.
a contract, whatever. How does that make you feel about your own? Like, it's almost a clown world that we're kind of not withdrawing consent from. We're contributing to by just going, hey, I'm going to go to the courthouse and get married to my wife because I really like marriage, and I really think that's the way that's my parents did it. That's how my grandparents did it. But these kids are not. It's not the same thing as their grandparents. It's different. It's a different. It's almost
Yeah.
a different word completely. Marriage has been. It's like there's two versions of marriage. One is this government way to do it. Like, you can do it with other men. You can do it with two women can get married, etc. You can do it with. I mean, it doesn't. It's not quite the same thing as what you're talking about. And then you have what you're talking about, which is, in my
Right.
mind, the covenant. It's two separate things. I think we both can agree on that, right?
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I think I'd be willing to just agree with you on that respect. Like, yeah, and especially if you're a secular man, you don't even believe in God, you don't believe in any of these things, then I really can't convince you. And here's the thing: if I was talking to a 25-year-old man and he was seeking advice on things like this, the first thing I would say is not, hey, you should go get married, right? Like, first of all, I want to know where your head's at. Do
Sure.
you even do you believe in God? Are you religious? Do you follow the rules and the non-marriage rules that have to do with that? Are you really somebody who is even in a position in your life to even consider doing something like that? So the question of, like, yeah, if I'm speaking to a 25-year-old man, that's not going to be the first piece of advice I get them. I don't even think necessarily that getting married is like, it may not even be the most important thing that a man should ever be worried about. Like, if you go through your whole life and you never get married, I don't necessarily think that you fail. I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Like, I simply think that if you seek to raise a family and that's one of your goals, ultimately I think marriage is going to be beneficial towards you. And if you choose the right woman, and if she's committed in the same way you are, then entering into the legal contract, you will gain all those benefits, and the risk of being burned on that is going to be a lot lower.
Okay. I mean, I
But
I I think we can
yeah.
agree on the risk being lower if you are practicing a religion or what have you. But it doesn't make sense to me to go after, because I'm thinking, like, what is the person that needs this advice? 25-year-old, like you said, it's not the first thing you're going to tell them, but they want to. Okay, if they want to have kids, if somebody says, hey, Dean, I'm 25, I just graduated college, or what have you, maybe I just graduated trade school, I'm an electrician, whatever. I'm making good money here. I live like in a studio apartment or one-bedroom apartment by myself. I want to have kids, but I can't find any woman around me that is kind of like-minded with me, and it's different situation. A lot of these women are, sacrilegious, a-religious, or they don't view, the way they don't view relationships the way I think they should be viewed. Like, what should I do? So, kick it over to you. What would you tell this guy here?
So in that case, my only advice would be stay focused on yourself. Follow the path that you believe you're called to, whatever that may be. And if in your heart you really really want to get married, you really want to have a family, I believe it will happen for you. You know, it's and I can't say how it's going to happen, and it may seem hopeless. But if that's something that's honestly a goal of yours, and you're really putting yourself out there, and you're meeting lots of women, and you're spending the time to vet them, and you really have the appropriate perspective to vet them with, which is probably much more important. Because that's why I'm saying you start with yourself, right? Because if you go into a situation, and you know, hey, I want to get married, I want to have kids, but you don't even know what that you don't even know yourself well enough to make the judgment of the woman, there's a very high chance you're gonna screw that up, right?
Right.
So first of all, you need to get right with yourself. You need to get right with God, and you need to be prepared to go into that to begin with. And if you're not, that's a much larger problem because that's going to affect everything in your life. It's going to affect your career. It's going to affect your non-merit romantic relationships. So that's a much bigger issue.
Well, I mean, I'm with you on that, but I'm just thinking if I'm 25 years old and I'm not religious. Let's say somebody that's not religious and 25 years old. I mean, you mentioned you got to get right with God. How do you get somebody that's, I guess, what programs need to be in place if you would have any program at all, government program, to encourage folks to turn to God or turn to, I guess, goodness, if you will. Let's say you don't even want to bring God into it. Turn to moral goodness. At 25 years old, I mean, I don't know about you, man, but when I was 25 years old, I was not godly. I was not God fearing. Let's put it that way. So
Yeah,
I don't know if
yeah, me neither.
there's nothing encouraging me at that time. I mean, society is telling me, hey, you got to go out there and get a job, and then women are also you're competing with women in some ways in some of these jobs, and then you have to find a girlfriend who, let's just be truthful, they have to make less money than you because they're not going to date you otherwise, outliers, etc. But so you have to find a woman who
Yeah,
makes less money than you. You have to compete with women to get a job, and then women
yeah.
are allowed to incur debt. And so if you're incurring debt as a woman, you be back in back in the old days, if a woman incurred debt, it would be under your name if you were married. So you would actually have to take their debt on as a liability as a married man. But now they can incur their own debt. They have credit cards. They have all this stuff. They have access to consuming the consumerism. It's running rampant. So you're not actually penalized from just withdrawing consent from the system. So in other words, let me make this point. In other words, if you simply go around and if you're a 25-year-old, blasphemer, you can run rampant with, sexual degeneracy. I don't advise that, but you can do that. And the system actually kind of is telling you to do that with all these statistics, with the way that debt is incurred, with the way that, marriage is, lopsided in favor of women. A
Mhm.
25-year-old man, just if he sees all this information and parses it himself, do you blame them for logically withdrawing consent and saying, hey, I'm just going to go be a sexual degenerate, I'm going to, just do my own thing, pursue my career, etc., and then not get married, not maybe even not have kids?
Okay, so the question of do I blame them? I do, yeah, I do still blame them for that. So this is kind of transferring into the segue of my point with men are supposed to be leaders, right? So you're absolutely right that in today's world, it's basically set up for you to be a degenerate, and the reason is that we've given, as I've said, we've given women a false platform, and I do believe it's an illusion. Right? Women have this sense of security in the world that's not real. It doesn't exist. Everything that if a woman goes to work and she lives by herself and she goes and earns money and she comes home and she has takes care of her cats, and all this, in her mind she's independent, right? But the reality of that is she's obviously not, right? She relies on men for basically everything in her life. She relies on men to live in the house that to build the house that she lives in, to build the car that she drives, to create all the inventions that she benefits from, her phone and her TV and her computer. She benefits from men's safe security because let's be honest, if you if there's a physical problem, a dangerous problem for a woman in her life, she's going to require a man to solve that for her. Okay, she can go get a gun, right? But let's Andrew Wilson makes this point all the time. If you have a war, let's say for some reason things get so bad that men and women are just completely opposed to one another, and there's a war of ideals, the men are going to win. So the men are going to get their way no matter what. The only reason that women have any sort of independence in our society is because we've set up this platform for that to exist, and it's an illusion. And as soon as we can remove that illusion, and I'm not, and it's that sounds a little scary, I think, probably especially to women, because what it almost sounds like I'm saying is that they should feel less safe, right? But it's more like they should more accurately understand that in this world there are men who are good and there are men who are dangerous. And in order to have any sort of security and safety as a woman, you need the men who are good to be able to physically impose their will on the men who are bad. And if we remove the agency from men to be able to do that. And we do that through a million different ways. I mean, the marriage is just one of the ways that we've crippled a man's ability to act like a good man's ability to actually take care of his family and take care of himself and to manage society the way it's meant to be managed. Uh, we could talk about marriage. You could talk about the universities. You could talk about the corporate culture that we live in. You could talk about the political system. Everything is designed to neuter men. And so the question is, do you blame men for just saying, screw it, I'm going to leave and not even bother, and I'm just going to go live my life, be a hedonist, and die and whatever? I do blame them for doing that.
You
Yes,
blame them.
because they're that. So here's the thing: you don't live in a vacuum. All right. So you can withdraw your consent all you want. You can withdraw your consent from the system and from the government all you want. But the reality is that by doing that, you're choosing a side. You have to choose a side. There's no sitting on the sidelines. That doesn't
Sure,
exist. You
sure.
either try to fix the issue by being a leader spiritually, physically, mentally, or you give up and you say, fuck it, and I'm going to go be a degenerate. And those are your two choices. You don't have,
So
you don't have
you're
a
really
third option.
avidly saying you blame them, and I guess blame is the wrong word I'm using. What I'm saying is, do you understand why they're doing it? And I agree with you. I honestly where we're gonna find middle ground is there's no we agree on the descriptors, we agree on what is, but I think we slightly disagree on what ought to be done. Although I know we both want I think we both want the same end result, right? I think if you let's make a blanket statement here. If every man, every couple could be married happily, obviously, that'd be ideal, right? All right. So
Yes.
so if
Yes.
so, we both want the same end goal. I just think we're going about it in different odds, right? Because for me, that young man who's 25, I do blame him. It's obviously his. I'm going to say, hey, listen, you got to find a way to make this your fault. Otherwise, it's never going to change. But on the same token side of the token, I do think it's understandable. And a 25-year-old man, even younger, 23, 24, it's it's just you're lost at that stage, and you're taking advice from, let's even say your parents. Your parents, if you're 25, your parents are probably 50, maybe a little bit older. It means they were kind of around in the 70s, the golden era, if you will. And this is they probably had an easy time getting married. I mean, maybe they had some high school sweetheart, and then they married that. If they didn't marry their high school sweetheart, maybe they found somebody. They maybe found, even if they go to find a lovely woman in their town, right? They get married, and that's it. This is, I mean, even if, I mean, actually, I don't even know even back then, but this is not something that I mean, you have the dating apps running rampant. You have all these there's no way you can translate that same advice. So I guess as a father who's to their 25-year-old son, his advice isn't going to necessarily work. So what I'm saying is that the call to action to this man at 25, yeah, withdraw consent is what he will do. And I guess if you can push him in the direction of, hey, participate in society but make it better, sure. But tell that to a 25-year-old when you have people in the government that are really you know, paying lobbyists, paying corporations, etc. They're not representing this 25-year-old's interests. Like the string of that takes this 25-year-old's interests to government change, it's very long. I don't think it's something that he
Yeah.
can see as an impact.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the thing. Do I understand it? Absolutely. And I have a lot of empathy because I am a man who's young, who's not married, and I would like to get married. So I fully understand all of the obstacles that are in the way. My case to the 25-year-old man would be this. Um, you are meant to be a leader. You're meant to accept risk. You're meant to enter into situations with uncertain outcomes that could blow up in your face. And if that's something you just simply refuse to do, I can't really convince you otherwise. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't necessarily, yeah, blame could be too harsh of a word. Like I wouldn't necessarily like argue or even necessarily look down. Like, it's your life. You're a man, you kind of have to go live the life you want to live. And if you don't want to listen to what I'm saying or to what other people are saying, okay, in a way, good for you. And frankly, I do kind of hope that you succeed. I hope everybody succeeds. I hope everybody finds their happiness. But my disagreement would be that there's only one path to happiness from my perspective, right? And if you're gonna choose a side and you're gonna choose the side that I'm against, we are in opposition, right?
Yeah.
And um, that's it. But
I,
but at the
I
same
just
time,
think
like I
that he's
said, I
25
I,
years
I
old.
do
I mean,
think it's understandable.
the system is so stacked against him. I think if you if you live in a society, again, I bring this up again. If you live in 1920 and you and I are having this conversation, let's say we're at the library or whatever, we're at somewhere, and we're talking about this, and you're saying, hey, should men get married? I would laugh at you. I'd be like, yeah, what do you mean? Should they get married? Of course they should. Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? It's like one of the
Yeah.
best things you could do is get married. Get married immediately. Get married at 18. Have kids.
So I think I think that speaks to this issue, to this point that I wanted to make. So you have, in my view, you have the government, and then you have the spiritual, cultural life of the people who live in the society, right? And these are two different things. These are two pillars that we operate under. And what's supposed to be the case is that the government is subservient to the culture. It's not supposed to be the other way around. But sadly, when you enter into a democracy like the one we live in, the reverse becomes true, right? As soon as you have these democratic ideals where everybody gets their say, and hey, all you have to do is convince people, hey, if you do this, if you let me take this lever of control away from you, then you're going to actually be happier. And all you have to do is convince 51% of the population that that's true, and now everybody lives under that tyranny, right? And this is how the government slowly etches away our control of the society, right? So ultimately, the correct order of things is to have the spiritual and the cultural life of the people control the government and use it as something to reinforce that culture. What we have today is the reverse of that, and people may think that that's too extreme. They may think that that's I'm just that that's not really true. That it couldn't possibly be true, but it is true. And in fact, we live in a society, as everything we're pointing out points to that. The cultures the culture has been degraded and it's been destroyed. If you go back to 1920, have this conversation, it sounds ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense, right? That's because they were living in a world where the culture and the spiritual world was controlling the government and not the other way around, right? They were starting to lose control at that time in particular, I'd say. But it started off that way. And that's what we need to get back to. If we had that in place and we could reform these institutions and maybe even destroy most of them, to be honest with you, if we could do that, we could turn marriage back into something that is just beneficial to everybody. Right now, marriage in a legal sense is, I would say, in the legal sense, is strictly beneficial to women. Maybe there's a tiny little gain you can make as a man
Overall.
if you really choose the right woman and
Overall.
you stay married forever. But yes, overall, it is extremely beneficial to women and only maybe beneficial to men, right? Which is the whole crux of this debate.
But and I'm with you, and I agree with you that a marriage out like the concept of covenant of marriage, it is more beneficial to both. It's a beneficial thing to everybody involved. I think if you can get happily married, it's a beneficial thing to the woman. It's a benefit, she gets safety and security from the man. Man gets love and compassion for the woman. You are one flesh. I get that, and it makes raising kids easier. It makes it better, everything better. And I just think that if you are spreading that as a message, hey, listen, what you're doing. But if you're saying, hey, listen to the 25-year-old again, I keep bringing him up because this is kind of somebody I'm hoping is, hearing
Yeah,
this.
that's who we're talking to. So
So the
yeah,
25-year-old that says, hey, I want to get married, but I'm dating this girl. I've been dating her for 9 months, a year, whatever. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about moving to the next step. Well, they never say that. She always asks, hey, where are we at? And he's thinking, hey, I'm wondering, I want to think about moving to the next step with this woman, but I brought up a prenuptial agreement, and she said that's evil, that's weird, and etc. But and again, I don't think it's. I think it's a sick thing. I think it's like something that is just. Why would you think about that? I think it's gross, but it doesn't matter what I think. It's like having insurance. And again, I think insurance. We can go on round topic off topic on that too, but it's something that is required. I feel like for most men. So I don't know if you would tell them, like, because you mentioned earlier, you said, well, prenuptial, you're thinking about how hey, this might fail, so don't get married to her if it might fail, right? And I agree with you on some blanket statement, don't get married to her if it might fail, but you can't say that to a 25-year-old now compared to a 25-year-old again in 1920, or I guess an 18-year-old back then. No need for a prenuptial agreement because the divorce rate wasn't rampant. But a 25-year-old now, I'm almost thinking, hey man, like, yeah, sign a prenup. It's like $1,000, just get it done, and it could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars down the line. So yeah, just sign it. So I don't know, man. It's something I think personally is what would cause me to go to the side of on your side of, hey, everyone get married through the government, etc. Like that's fine, but just get a prenup, right? And again, that's me defeating. That's almost me with a defeatist attitude, saying, hey, if you're going into something thinking it's going to fail, it might fail even just because you're thinking that. And I get that. That's a psychological thing, but I think it's still something that you should do. I think it's like bring an umbrella just in case, right?
yeah. I don't know how I really feel about prenups. My pushback would be what you just said, probably, which is if you enter into it with the idea that it could potentially fail, then you're inviting that in. That's a possibility, right? Like,
Right.
but I think that when you get married, it's supposed to be. It's not something you can fail. It's like you're changing yourself fundamentally. Okay, so and that gets that. There's another point I wanted to make, which I think is related to that, which is basically there's a biblical principle that if you enter into something, if you're walking forward blindly the way God wants you to do, there's a very good chance that you will actually think that you're failing, and it will actually even just seem like you didn't succeed in what you wanted to do, and then um, that it was a waste of time, right? That's one of the challenges when I'm speaking to this 25-year-old man is I am telling him, and I'm fully aware of this, and it's not something I really can overcome. I can only say to him, I'm encouraging you to enter into something which is totally uncertain, which very well might blow up in your face, and you should do it anyway, right? Like, and that's very difficult for me to convey with, especially just to a 25-year-old man who didn't have my pre-existing Christian beliefs on this, right? And so that's why in many cases I wouldn't necessarily make that argument to somebody like that, because I would start somewhere else, because I'd have to make it clear why you should trust God with things like this, even though you don't necessarily see the outcome. I could try to make the point, which is basically it's true in every other aspect of your life. It's true in your career. It's true in your university. Whatever path you go down, whatever you're trying to do, you don't know what the end result is going to be. You just have to go do it. You just have to walk this path, this blind path with no lights on it, and just feel your way around and hope that at the end of the path, there's going to be a reward for you. What now? I happen to believe that there will be one, that it's guaranteed by a power that goes beyond any earthly thing that you can lay eyes on. But again, that's the issue. Is I'm telling you to look. There's a wall in front of you, and I'm telling you, well, you just have to run through it, and at the other side, there will be open space, and there's going to be everything you want there. But they're going to look at the wall and they're going to say, you're delusional. Like, what are you even saying? I'm not doing that, right? And so I'd
No,
have to start much further back.
and I definitely empathize with that. And I think to add to that, I think there's a lot going on with 25 to 30-year-old men having not very good success in the dating world right now. And I think a lot of that comes
Hmm.
down to, the culture that's being spread right now is advocating for sexual degeneracy. And this is actually just not the culture's fault. As you mentioned, I think from your perspective, it's the government that has captured the culture.
Yes.
Kind of what you said earlier, touching on that. And yeah, that's a big deal. I think the advertisers, the corporations, the conglomerates, etc. This is what I call the corporatocracy or the corporate class. They definitely control a lot of what people do. I mean, if you ask me like how many times I've had somebody tell me, "Hey, it's Black Friday is coming up. We got to buy stuff." Well, hey man, like why
Yeah.
are you want to buy something just because the government says? Oh, not the government. I guess it's because people have created this Black Friday thing. It's like, do you need that thing? Were you ever thinking
Yeah.
about that air fryer or that whatever? I mean, whatever the hell you just told me. Like,
Yeah.
are you? Why would you? Is that something you just thought of, or is that something that you're a product of advertising? So just how much power they
Yeah.
have, and just that level of, like, they can literally create holidays. They create Black Friday as a holiday so that
Yeah.
people spend money. So if they can create a
Yeah.
culture that is pro sexual degeneracy, with all the tools that everybody has at their disposal to, not suffer the consequences from what would have been in 1920 or what have you. From sexual degeneracy in 1920, you're risking. I mean, there's no way to get rid of the consequences, right? And we can go into that later. But the point is, they're not punished for sexual degeneracy as much as you used to be. And I don't
Yeah.
think it should be encouraged at all. There should be no encouragement of sexual degeneracy in the form of like all these movies coming out in Hollywood saying, "Hey, even James Bond, like I love James Bond, great guy, great movie, but not great guy, but great movie. But it's just about him having as much sex with as much women as possible. I mean, he doesn't actually have sex with them in the movies, but it's implied. And everybody looks up to this
Yeah.
James Bond guy and says, "Hey, I want to have as much sexual degeneracy, as much sexual immorality as I can because James Bond did it and he's a cool motherfucker." Well, that's just one example of this. If we had not allowed that movie to go into circulation, or movies like that, or television shows like Friends with rampant sex jokes everywhere, people wouldn't be hyper focusing on like sexual morality and Tinder dating and Hinge hookups, etc. And they, I think, would be focusing on, hey, let me, like you're saying, build my career up, build my hobbies up, build my fitness up, and then let women kind of come to me, right? And I get you. Like
Yeah.
a man as 25-year-old is not going to have women coming right to him, right? Obviously, you got to set your career up, set your fitness up, etc. And then they'll start coming to you. But we're talking about the average man here, and I think the average man is actually getting very, very fucked, if you will, by this, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
They're getting destroyed by this degeneracy and by this culture that you said is how the government is capturing, and really it's the advertising companies and the money corporations and stuff. They are capturing society. So I don't think it's
Yes.
I don't think it's as easy as go to church, find God, etc. I think there's a bigger solution here, a more broader, like a broad type solution. So I don't know. It's a tough situation because I am taking more of the black pill, um, position on this argument, and you are taking the white pill. So you do have more hope and stuff. And again, I want to be hopeful, but it's tough when I see the numbers and I see the degeneracy, and I look around outside and I see literal advertisements for degeneracy on billboards. It's really disgusting,
Yeah.
man. I don't know about you, but when I
Yeah.
drive
I would
around, I
say
see this
this.
stuff. Go ahead.
I don't know that I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm more hopeful that well, I suppose I am just by default because what I'm advocating for is like I do believe that if every man woke up tomorrow and agreed with me, we could fix the world, right? Of course, every man believes that though, right? So I don't necessarily think that this is something you can. I don't know. I'm even, and this is another reason it's a very difficult argument for me to make because even if I'm talking to this 25-year-old man, I don't necessarily think he's going to succeed, and I don't think that even if everybody we succeed in sort of pushing things forward towards closer to what I want, that it's even going to pay off within our lifetimes, right? But that's the point. That's why I tried to make that point about the biblical principle.
Right.
The ideal thing you can do, and this is not just related to marriage, but to you as a human being, and this actually applies to women too, but it definitely applies to men. You should seek to obliterate yourself, your ego, who you are, these worldly concerns, these things that you want so badly. Seek to get rid of that. Seek to blow that out of the water. You don't even want that in your head that I want a certain house, I want a certain car, I want to marry a pretty wife, I want to have this many kids. You should actually forget about those goals. You should take everything you want and understand one thing, and this is biblical, so this people are going to bristle at this. But what you want is evil. What you want is wrong. What you want is misguided. You are guided by Satan. We are earthly beings who are fallen, and everything that you want will bring you further away from the light of God. So that's my main point here is that once you accept that, if you can accept that, and then you give your life to God and you follow him in the way that he wants you to follow him, that is your only true path, guaranteed path to success in the end. But it's not guaranteed on earth. These earthly rewards are never guaranteed to you. And if you can accept that, if and think about this even from a secular point of view, if you could say, I am fully willing to fail at everything and to lose everything, that's how you gain everything because you lose the fear, right? As a wise man once said, you gain everything because you lose the fear and you're no longer afraid of what if. You're no longer attached to a certain outcome. If you can get rid of those desires in you that you want a certain outcome, everything is possible for you. You can walk forward and it doesn't matter what happens. I tried to go do this, it sucked, I failed. Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter because I have my eyes on the God and I'm following him and I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So that is the ultimate freedom. That's the ultimate freedom that I think everybody should go after. And if you have that mindset when it comes to marriage, all of these risks, all of these legal risks, all of the potential of failure doesn't matter anymore because you're doing the right thing and that's all that matters in the end.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're coming up to the almost 1 hour mark here, and I do want to close it out here. But I do want to say thanks for the debate, and it was interesting. It definitely learned a lot here. But I'm thinking as far as to kind of close out and to what was discussed, I think we agree a lot on what should happen. I just don't think that. And again, I might be coming to your side on a lot of this, but I don't think marriage is set up right now for men to be succeeding. Um, so there's certain reforms that can be made to obviously no fault divorce. If that, I think a barrier, like, yeah, that's to kind of close it up, a barrier of exit or a barrier of entry to marriage. Making it harder to get married. Maybe it shouldn't be so easy to get married through the court of law. Because if you go to church through the Orthodox Church, they don't just marry you; they have to have a pastor ordain you. And sometimes people don't even get ordained. They won't allow it because they're not. They have somebody that makes a judgment call and they don't allow that. So I think if we had something like that in the state, a lot of people would say, well, hey, my freedoms and my preferences, but they're going away. But I don't know. We sacrifice a lot of freedoms every day for certain things just for the betterment of society. So this might be one of those things that might need to be a little bit G checked. But I don't know. That's kind of where I'm closing
Yeah.
out. I'll kick it over to you.
Okay. So yeah, Mike, to close out, I would say that I do think we agree primarily on the question of legality. The question of the legal system is not set up for men to succeed. My ultimate point would be that if you're interested in blazing the path, if you're interested in actually saying, I hate the world we live in, right? I hate the dating apps. I hate the culture. I hate everything that's set up to neuter me as a man and to set me up for failure and to cut me off. Then if you hate those things, then by if you there's two options you have. You either rebel against it and you just do what God wants you to do anyway, and you follow that path and you accept whatever earthly consequences you're going to have because you know you have a greater reward waiting for you. That's the true rebellion. That's truly how you push against this. And if we all could collectively agree to follow paths like that, we would that's how we would fix problems.
Mm,
If you choose the other path that's sitting before you, it will not fulfill you. You will not be happy. And in many ways you're just going to have to figure that on your own because I guarantee you're not going to take my word for it, right? So to the 25-year-old man I would say do what you think is best. And I genuinely root for you to succeed and to find happiness. But I can tell you from my personal experience, I guarantee you that if you go live the life of hedonism, of pleasure, it's not going to fulfill you. You're not going to get what you want. You're going to be empty. You're going to be lonely, and you're going to damage yourself so that even when you do come back around, and I think you will eventually, even if you do come back around and you see, okay, yeah, that was kind of a waste of time and it was really just shitty, you're going to come back around and say, and be scarred. It's going to be harder for you to love. It's going to be harder for you to trust women. It's going to be harder for you to form relationships. You're crippling yourself if you go down this path. And if you can figure it out, the earlier you can figure this out, the happier you're going to be.
okay. Well, hey man, thanks for the debate, and I guess everybody, if you enjoy this content, check out maneuver.life, and it's gonna be mnvr.life. We'll put a link in the description. But yeah, I think we wrap it up there. And yeah, thanks again for the debate. It was a good debate for sure.
Yeah, good stuff, man. All
All
right,
right.
talk soon.